Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, Megan and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you. Plus, today we are talking about the LPAC and transitional kindergarten, some of the work that's being done inside the Capitol right now to solve a very big problem with our first-year learners.
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
And it's just a couple of minutes after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break. I'm Naj Alikan, ACSA Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. We are lucky today to have Megan Baer with us from ACSA's Governmental Relations Department, one of our legislative advocates. We've had a busy day. We've had a busy few weeks. We figured this was a perfect opportunity for Megan to be here. Also, Edgar is what we like to say in TV, on assignment today. Which is why he's not here. Megan, how are you?
Doing all right, Naj. How are you?
I'm good. You celebrated your son's birthday on Saturday. We'll talk in a moment about why I know that we were celebrating your son's birthday on Saturday. Which son is it? How old is he?
Mateo is 4.
4 years old. Okay. A good age. Is he playing soccer yet? Edgar would be asking the same question. Is he playing soccer yet?
Not yet. Not yet. Maybe soon.
Maybe soon. All right. We'll get him on that path. Coming up in a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about the LPAC. If you're not familiar with that, it's an assessment that's given to students 30 days into their educational career. But there's a bit of a problem with that. Transitional kindergarten. These are some of our first learners that are getting that assessment. We're going to talk about that with some of the advocates to make some changes with the LPAC and transitional kindergarten. So again, we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. First up, we have an agreement on the budget that the legislature is sending over to the governor. Our team's been going back and forth on this over the weekend as we work through this document. I want to just pull a couple of pieces out, Megan, because these are the things that matter to our members the most. First off, Proposition 98. What is the update on Prop 98?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been following really closely. I think everyone knows the state has a revenue problem. The initial proposal, budget proposal, we were very concerned about. But overall, this agreement that came out on Saturday, which is why Naj and I were talking on a Saturday, is pretty positive. So Prop 98 is completely protected. They've actually reduced the amount of deferral there. So a very positive outcome from where we started in January.
And then we've talked about this emergency school closures here on the show before. What has been the outcome with that?
Yes, so the governor had a proposal we were very concerned about and actively lobbied against that would have required schools to offer remote instruction after 5 days of a school closure. We heard loud and clear from our members during fires and evacuations, trying to get remote learning up and going is just not feasible. So there was a compromise ultimately brokered between the legislature, the governor, and working with our association and our sister orgs. So we're pretty happy with the outcome. The districts are going to have to do some planning and at least make an effort to try to offer remote learning when they can, but there's no fiscal penalty in the event that they're not able to. So we're really happy with that outcome.
All right, you said a key word there, planning. So let me just kind of set this one up. Politico reached out to us on Saturday. We keep going back to Saturday, Megan, to talk about your son's birthday, but Saturday reached out to specifically about a stipulation in the budget on layoff protections for certificated and classified school staff for the upcoming year. It provides a 1-year freeze on LEA's ability to terminate permanent and probationary certificated and classified employees between the budget enactment and August 15th of the budget year, if the LCFF cost of living adjustment is less than 2%. Okay. First off, can you explain this to me? Because like I said, my fifth grade education on numbers is not working on this one.
So there's what we kind of call the August layoff window. It's a small period of time that LEAs, when they need to make staffing changes, budget changes, can utilize. We're not surprised to see it. We had heard that this was being advocated for by labor unions, but in this budget agreement, that August layoff window is closed. So it's just for this August, though.
Okay, so and there's one other piece, and I know we're kind of monitoring what's happening in the Capitol right now because something could break while we're on the air, and we always love breaking news over here, but there is something that could break while we're here on the air. And I want to ask you about the school bond and the November ballot because we may have action on this issue, as I said, within the next couple of minutes. So, Megan, what can you tell us about that school bond?
Yes, absolutely. So, as many of our members know, the facilities bonds that the state issues are the funds have completely run out. So, ACSA has been working to try to get another school bond on the November ballot. School bond negotiations are notoriously intense. So, we're kind of right up against the wire here in terms of there's provisions that it has to pass by a certain amount of time so the Secretary of State can actually get the ballots printed and out to the millions of voters across the state. So we do expect to see what's in that bond agreement here very soon. And we're very hopeful that it's going to be favorable for our K-12 facilities.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you an inside baseball question then. When you're talking about a school bond, putting that on the ballot, is one of the pieces of information that kind of informs the process, do they think that voters are actually going to support and approve this type of school bond? Does that go into the line of thinking?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there is often polling done. There's often focus groups done. And our last school bond failed, and it did include. It was notable because the school bond. I want to say it was called Prop 13, which the number probably also didn't help.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it also included UC and CSU facilities, included with K-12 and community colleges, and it failed. So, that's kind of one of the big tensions over this bond negotiation. Voters in the past have been less sympathetic to want to, put additional tax dollars towards those facilities. So that's one of the big contentions. And at ACSA, we're hoping to see a traditional school bond that includes K-12 and community colleges. So we should have news here in the next day or two.
I was hoping that we'd somehow get it in the next 21 minutes. That would have just really added to the intrigue of our show. Let's go ahead and switch to our main topic today, which is English language proficiency assessment, or LPAC, as many of you know it. This is an assessment, as we said at the top of the show, given to students within the first 30 days of a student's enrollment in public school if their home language survey indicates that a language other than English is spoken in their homes. Now, if the assessment identifies them as English learners, state and federal law requires students to be tested annually to measure their progress towards English proficiency. And of course, as TK continues to grow, this seems to be a bit of a problem, this LPAC, because students in TK are getting their first experience in school, and the LPAC was assessing students in their first 30 days in the classroom. So it's about a problem. There are advocates out there that wanted to change this, and we have two of those advocates on our show right now. Tandy Taylor is the Executive Director of Educational Services with Cypress Elementary School District, also our ACSA Early Education Council President, and Carolyn Crolot is Director of Dual Language Learner Programs at Early Edge, California. Tandy and Carolyn, it's great to have you here. We're honored to have you with us on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Carolyn, let me have you get everyone up to speed on what the English language proficiency assessments are. What is on that assessment, especially for our educators who are in secondary schools and may not be familiar with the LPAC?
Yes, happy to share, and thank you for having me on the show and for sharing about this important issue. So this is mandated by federal law, and so because of the way that TK is defined as year one of a 2-year kindergarten program, it abides by ACSA and some requirements related to English language proficiency assessments. And so here in California, we use the LPAC. that you just shared to assess children on their language proficiency. So this assessment, looks at children's language proficiency in English across the 4 domains of reading, writing, listening, and speaking.
Tandy, can we discuss, let's discuss the environment before this Assembly Bill 2268 and the administration of the LPAC to students and TK. What have been the challenges for administering the LPAC?
So thank you for having me here today. As a previous kindergarten teacher, I was responsible for, before the LPAC, administering the test. So I understand the critical needs of really knowing where a child's language proficiency is. But when you talk about children in transitional kindergarten, you're talking about our youngest learners. And as that date changes, some districts have accelerated while some are doing the EdCode rollout. You are getting younger and younger until some districts will have some students that will not quite be 3 years old when they enter. And so that developmental level of how language is developed is not there yet. They're still developing their language. Secondary, as a teacher who taught young children, you always talk about stranger danger. So now you have to imagine you have a 4-year-old there, Megan. Your child walking in, they don't know the teacher yet. They don't know their peers necessarily. And now somebody comes in to pull them for an assessment. It's very, very scary and intimidating for a child, especially if their language is limited or they have no English proficiency yet. So now they can't communicate effectively as well. And because of all of these factors, when they're interacting with strangers that they don't know, when they're still trying to get their foot just into school to understand it, we get false data. We really are not able to accurately assess students. Additionally, with what the LPAC looks like today, is that it's around kindergarten level of expectation. So you're asking questions, or we have asked questions even in the past, that were really not developmentally appropriate. So they're not answering appropriately because they actually are not responsible yet for that content.
Yeah, Tandy, it's interesting that you would talk about from the kindergarten point of view, and then Megan having the 4-year-old, because when I had this discussion with my wife, who's a kindergarten teacher, her first thing was, oh my gosh, that's incredibly difficult for these students who are just coming in to transitional kindergarten. They have TK at their school, and she thinks of some of those students and thinks, I can't imagine that student having to have that assessment within the first 30 days. So
we have children.
Certainly.
I'm gonna say we have children climbing under desks and hiding and just breaking down dysregulation because of the fear, because we're putting on a demand that is really not developmentally appropriate.
Yeah, well, and Helio Brazil, who's one of our loyal viewers, put right here on our chat, at that early age, all children are learning language, which is, it's very valid. Folks, if you have questions for Carolyn or Tandy, go ahead and drop those into the chat. So Carolyn, AB 2268 has passed the legislature and is going to the governor. This is an urgency measure, so it goes into effect as soon as he signs it. Does this show that lawmakers have been listening to your advocacy, whether it's been Early Edge, whether it's been, Tandy, early education advocates in general? Is this kind of okay, they're finally listening to what we have to say?
Yes, definitely. And I can just share also a little bit more background about the bill and, why we decided to move this bill forward. So as you mentioned, as we're expanding this laudable policy of becoming the state with the largest pre-K program in the nation through our transitional kindergarten program, this program originally was just for children with birthdays between September 2nd and December 2nd. So the LPAC that is being used currently was field tested and validated for those older children who were originally in TK. But now as we're expanding TK to reach younger and younger children and eventually all children, all 4-year-olds and children, as my colleague here shared, that are not even 4 yet, we were really questioning the developmental appropriateness of this assessment. So even the fact that it includes reading and writing at all, and these children are pre-literate, they're just starting to recognize letters. The assessment was asking, read this word, write this word. We were also seeing high levels of English learner designation when we know that, that was not accurate because the test was just too hard for them. So this is an issue that we really were committed to, as we're committed to implementation of transitional kindergarten, and making sure we're setting up our children for success as much as possible for their first learning experience. So yes, definitely our lawmakers heard loud and clear about the need for this bill. So now it has been signed by the governor, and so we're very excited about that. So because of the urgency clause that you just mentioned, so at this point, we should not be using the LPAC at all in transitional kindergarten.
Yeah, and I want to concur. I know I've been talking to my colleagues. Everyone is so very, very grateful that what is right for a child was actually done in that. I don't know. I can talk about an assessment that's currently already out there that is appropriate for children of this age. Would this be a good time?
Yeah, absolutely, Tandy. So LPAC's going to go away. So, I think that is the natural next question is, so then what can LEAs use when they are trying to assess students? That would be great.
Right. So the desired results developmental profile, or what we like to call the DRDP, has a scale of proficiency that is already been vetted and used, particularly in the preschool world, around language development. And there's 4 areas in that to assess students. I shouldn't say assess, but to look at where they are in their proficiency. And there's kind of a pre and a post for you to do it, because it's around a developmental scale. As we talked about, or what we just said, is that children of this age are still developing language. And so this tool allows teachers to do it in a very authentic setting, to look at the student's language development in a way that would be appropriate to a child of this age range.
Let me ask a couple of questions here, if I may, and we're blessed here to have Megan with us as well, because this is a budget question. It's a funding question, and I was just trying to look up the school district, but this is from Pioneer Union Elementary School District. I hope I got that correct. The question is, has there been consideration for loss of funds, i.e. supplemental concentration funding for TK students who might otherwise be identified as an English learner? Anything any of you could talk about with that?
Yes, I can share a little bit, and I can share also about where things are in terms of, you asked what can be done instead. So CDE has shared some interim guidance, immediate guidance to say, let's stop the use of the LPAC for our children as soon as possible right away. And, please use the home language survey to identify if they speak a language other than English, and support children's language development. So they will be releasing additional guidance, and I will share that they also, CDE has developed a informational memo for the state board for discussion at the July board meeting. And I can share the link here. Hopefully, we can get it in the chat for folks. And in that memo, it lays out many different possibilities and options, and talks about all of the different implications for not using the LPAC for children in TK, and what does that mean for funding? What are the implications for accountability? What are some other states doing to support, identify and support English learners, multilingual learners in preschool and kindergarten, and then, including some potential solutions, including the DRDP. And so it's still TBD. The next steps now are taking this information, the state board members discussing it at the July meeting, to think through what are some potential next steps. But it is a long-term solution. So we are thinking, what can we do right now with our students? And that's really looking at how we can support their language development through some different resources, really focusing on how we can support their home language and their English language development when we know that there's a language other than English spoken at home. And related to the supplemental and concentration funding, there is a section on that in the memo. I will say that it is significantly mitigated because of the unduplicated pupils, where 75% of English learners are also from low income households. And so the funding issue is significantly mitigated. And my colleague Patty Herrera, who I believe you all know, has spent a lot of time investigating this and looking at the potential implications, and wanted to share that information as well.
That's really helpful. And I think that is a good point, is that most English language learners are also low income. I think, and you spoke to this a little bit. So it looks like you did answer Shannon's question for the S&C dollars. And really it is about not over-identifying, right? And the LPAC not being an appropriate tool. So it's not a disincentive, or can you speak to that a little bit, either of you?
I was going to say, as someone who's looking at a district, looks at budget, has to manage all of that. It's real easy to use your student information system, kind of query out of really what your impact is. And when I look across the district and those that I work with on the council, we're very, very different, right? Each district has its own unique profile. And so as it was just shared, is 75% of the students who are are developing their language and identified as a second language learner also are in poverty. And so it's really just looking at your school specifically, or your district specifically, of how that would impact. And I've been doing that analysis, and I'll be working with my business department as well. But we do feel that it will be very narrow of that impact, that it won't impact our program. And then it'll allow us those to still move forward, because what's right for children is knowing what their language level is in developmental stages, so that we can continue to provide that ongoing support built into the school day, in recognition and honoring their home language, as well as then developing their language proficiency.
And I'll ask both of you this question. I know previously we asked about, what else can LEAs use for assessments. It's our understanding that the California Department of Education is expected to take this issue up. But I wonder, from your perspectives, and Carolyn, I'll have you respond first. Do you get a sense that there might be something down the road that is similar to the LPAC, but for TK students? Carolyn, I'll have you respond, and then Tandy after that.
Sure. Yes, that's actually one of the options that's laid out in the memo that I shared. However, it will require several years to develop something like that, because to abide by the federal mandates and requirements, it will need to be validated, field tested, etc. And so in order for that to happen, it would take quite a lot of time. So something like that could be happening, but it would be really down the road. And so the first step is thinking about how can we, support children now. And there, it also mentions in the memo, because children are just 4 years old, there's also no consensus on what it even means to be proficient in language at 4 years old.
And Tandy, your thoughts?
Right. So I concur. I really do feel that there's something that's going to be, coming down. I think having a standard or expectation so that we can measure children across our state is vital. But it would really be, I'm hopeful. I expect that it'll be aligned to the developmental needs of children, and how it's administered and how it's observed, and that that it's very thoughtful and it's worked out, as Charlotte just said, is that it'll take time to develop something of that nature. And then it's including those that have been working with children at this age group, as well as, I think, even like your speech and language pathologists, people who really understand the developmental levels of language and the development, to understand what is typical and what is not typical. We also don't want to get into that over-identification of students in putting them into a category that is not needed, but we want to ensure we're providing the necessary services for them to access their schooling.
Just folks, as we close out, I think it's important for me to acknowledge that Carolyn is not currently in California doing this. Now, Tandy is in her offices over at Cypress Elementary School District, but Carolyn is not. Carolyn, would you like to tell all of our viewers, just so they can feel a little jealous, about where you're broadcasting from today?
Sure. I'm in Brazil, where my family is. I grew up speaking French, Portuguese, English. I'm raising my children as multilingual learners. They also speak French, Portuguese, and English. So this is a critical issue to me, very near and dear. So I'm happy to be joining here even on my vacation, to be sharing this information with you all. And I do also just want to take the opportunity to share that we do, this is a momentous, occasion. This is something really to celebrate, that we're, as Tammy mentioned, that children were really being traumatized by this. And as their first learning experience, we want to support children, help them create a love for school and love for learning. So how can we use this as an opportunity to do what's best for children? And so moving away from a deficits approach that they're deficient in English, and really using this as an opportunity to build on the assets that they bring from their homes, to really help them develop their bilingualism, biliteracy, and really support their home language, build those relationships with families, help families understand the important role of the home language in English acquisition, and provide those tools for what they can do at home to support the home language as they're learning English in school. So really looking forward to seeing how our districts can support our children. And we'll share just one more resource here in the chat, which is the Multilingual Learning Toolkit, which is a website that has many strategies and resources for supporting multilingual learners preschool through third grade. It's evidence-based, grounded in research. And so would, love for those to check that out and use it with their students.
We'll definitely get those into the chat. Tandy Taylor, Executive Director of Educational Services with Cypress Elementary School District, and our ACSA Early Education Council President, and Carolyn Crolot, Director of Dual Language Learner Programs at Early Edge California. Tandy and Carolyn, it's been great to have you here on the show. We look forward to having you next time.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
And folks, if you like what you see here on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, we invite you to subscribe to us on YouTube or like us on Facebook. When you do, you'll get instant alerts when we're going to come on with breaking news here with the lunch break. And then, of course, you'll get a reminder for our regularly scheduled Wednesday show. Also, if you have great stories happening in your school districts, we want to amplify those stories too. Go ahead and send your photos, your press releases, your talking points to our EdCal editor, Michelle Carl, at mcarl@axa.org. We also have something brand new for you called Behind the Bills. It's our podcast, all from our ACSA governmental relations team. It's everything you want to know about governmental relations, but you were afraid to ask. Well, we're actually going to put them behind a microphone to tell you what's happening inside the state capitol. That is Behind the Bills, which you can listen to now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also want to let you know, if you haven't been monitoring YouTube, although I do know many of you have been, our 2024 Every Student Succeeding video story series launched last week. And if you haven't seen the first story featuring Julio Garcia Gil from Victor Valley Union High School District in Region 12, not to worry. You can watch it on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. 19 stories coming your way over the next 19 weeks. Our next video featuring an incredible bond between a student and her principal is available to watch starting tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Our ACSA Every Student Succeeding series, Emmy-nominated ESS video series. YouTube and Facebook. Definitely go to that. I know, Megan, you watched that very first video last week. This is just such a great series, something that ACSA is proud to present all of these 19 students. So certainly more of those to talk about. Very excited that we are launching that series. It's 1:30 all of a sudden, Megan. The one thing I can say now that we had Gail Olson, who was watching from Cabo San Lucas, I believe. But now we've actually had somebody live from a completely different country. To me, that means we're like a global show now. Would you agree?
Basically, I mean, that's the only natural takeaway from that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.